Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the stories you need to know about from right across the continent. First though, let's start working through the markets here for you. So today was a third straight day of gains to the top 40 over at the JSE. Frankly, the only gainer that we have on this particular board, aside from the all-share index as well. Mining stocks dragging the indices higher, boosted by a rise in iron ore prices. The NSE 20 in Kenya continuing with its downhill trajectory. Barely crested over 30.50 in mid-Feb, but it's been downhill ever since. Earnings season is still continuing, by the way. Kenya reissued a profit warning for 2018. It's citing a combination of high claim reserves, foreign currency losses due to devaluations among the issues. The market clearly didn't like that. Its shares were down by nearly 10% at the close. Here's what's coming up tonight. We'll be looking at the scale of devastation in Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi in the wake of Cyclone Idai. What were last-minute calls by crew from the Ethiopian plane that crashed tell us about the state of the Boeing 737 MAX? And furniture made out of Nigeria. We'll take a walk on the fashion side of life when we come back. Tonight, though, let's start in what the United Nations is describing as possibly the worst weather-related disaster to ever hit Southern Africa. Cyclone Idai has caused widespread damage, and that, frankly, is a bit of an understatement. The UN estimated 1.7 million people were in the path of the cyclone in Mozambique alone. The country's president, Filipe Nyusi, estimated more than 1,000 people died in the wake of the storm. Areas of the country do remain submerged, wholly submerged in water. The International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies estimated 90% of the port city of Beira, that's the fourth largest city in that country, was destroyed by the storm. Cyclone Idai also swept through parts of Zimbabwe and Malawi relatively hard. In Malawi, over 900,000 people in the path of the cyclone. The United Nations World Food Programme is appealing to the international community for as much aid as they can get right now.
This situation is very an important crisis, and that must be seen as an important crisis. A lot is needed. I don't think that the world realizes yet the scale of the problem, especially in Mozambique. We have a bit less information about Zimbabwe and Malawi. In Malawi, some of the people displaced start to go back home, to rebuild their home. Then the situation looked a bit better there. But for Mozambique, it's definitely an important crisis. Additional funding is necessary for the whole UN family and obviously for the World Food Programme.
Now in Zimbabwe, rescue crews are struggling to reach the victims of Cyclone Idai. Survivors of the storm are trapped in remote areas of the country simply because infrastructure has just been completely destroyed. Flooding has made it extremely difficult. It's making it harder for aid workers to reach those who are in need. Roads have been badly damaged, buildings have been flattened en masse, and villages have been submerged in floodwater. More than 2.6 million people in southeastern Africa were affected by this tropical cyclone. Zimbabwe is not the only country affected. A large number of schools that are based in flood-affected areas in Malawi have been shut down entirely. Some are being used as evacuation centers. Children are currently studying under trees after floods destroyed their classrooms. Our reporter Daniel Arab Moy is in Malawi. He brings us the latest.
Hundreds of children in southern Malawi have seen their lives turned upside down by the devastating floods. School authorities have been compelled to organize classes and continue with academic work under trees. The situation has become unbearable for both teachers and pupils as torrential rains continue to disrupt academic exercise.
Most of the learners, they are not coming to school because the rivers are flooded and they are unable to cross those rivers to come to school.
Some of the pupils studying under trees say academic exercise comes to a halt whenever it rains. Displaced parents remain uncertain about the future of their children as their hope for a quick recovery fades away.
The problem is that many students lost some books and learning materials such as ruler, pencils, and men.
We
ask the government to help us with shelter. We don't have food. We don't have blankets, and our children are not able to go to school because they have nothing to wear.
Some have now opted to seek learning inside abandoned village church house over fears of possible return of the deadly flash floods. These children have not only had their education dreams shattered, they have also lost their homes, schools and even friends. In Full Primary School, children lack the basics of education as condition forces them to sit on the cold classroom floor. According to officials, torrential rain and flash floods have displaced more than 200,000 children south of Malawi. The Department of Disaster Management Affairs says 56 people have died and 577 injured due to the heavy downpour and subsequent floods south of Malawi. Forecasts predict the severe weather may continue in the coming days and weeks, intensifying the dangerous situation for thousands of children. For now, these little children need all the help they can get, and they need it now. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Chikwawa District, Malawi.
And Daniel Arab Moy joins us now live from Lilongwe in Malawi. So, Daniel, bring us up to speed. As far as the number of displaced persons and those killed in the damage caused by Cyclone Idai are concerned, what's the latest data?
Well, the latest data so far indicates that 56 people have died. Now, these are the official figures from government officials here in Malawi, that 56 people have died out of these floods and 577 have been injured during this devastation. So these are the clear figures that we are getting from the disaster ministry here in Malawi. So this is the figure that we are carrying forward, but there could be more people that could have been killed in these floods, but that is what the government is giving us. But also what we are seeing here on ground is that the devastation, yes, the United Nations is saying that Malawi is a little bit better, but what we're seeing here on the ground is that the people here actually need a lot of help. There's a lot of silence from authorities, so the people that are in displaced camps that have been set up across the southern part of Malawi really indicates that they're in dire need of humanitarian assistance as we stand right now, because there is no water facilities, there is no food available to give to these people. There are no medical supplies enough to give to these people that are here, and we hope that this can be sorted out as soon as possible to give some relief to the people that are affected here.
Indeed. So UN officials said that over 900,000 people were in the cyclone's path in Malawi, another 1.7 million next door in Mozambique. From where you are, what you've seen in the last couple of days, what are the immediate problems that authorities have to deal with?
Well, first of all, the immediate problem, as I mentioned earlier, is the people here need something to put in their stomach. They need food. There is virtually no food. Yes, the government has tried to bring in a few tons of rice. I was speaking to one of the officials today from Nsanje. That is one of the hard-hit areas here in southern Malawi. And he was telling us that, yes, yesterday some food came in, but it wasn't enough because the number of the displaced is so big that the rice that was brought was not enough to feed the population that is displaced here. And secondly, one of the key challenges that they're having is that they don't have access to health facilities. There is nothing whatsoever. Sick children have nowhere to go. And another area that is of great concern to the displaced people here is that there is virtually no shelter whatsoever. They're living in one huge tent that accommodates about 500 to 800 people. So majority of the people actually live outside the open, in the cold. Now that is very disturbing, especially for the little children that are here in Malawi, especially in the southern part where devastation has taken place. And also the hygiene condition of the place is not suitable for little children and pregnant mothers as well. So there is a great risk that a cholera outbreak could be one of the issues that officials would be looking at right now. And also from this angle, we are looking at the broken down infrastructure development in these areas. Many of the roads are impassable right now. Children cannot get easily to school, and a majority of them are staying back home for fear that if they attempted to cross, they could either be swallowed up by the running waters. So those are the key challenges that officials here are trying to look at to ensure that they correct these as soon as possible. Otherwise, that is how the picture is here in southern Malawi.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for that update. Now, of course, this is a multi-country disaster, so let's go to ground zero, the first country that was actually hit, and so far the hardest hit by Cyclone Idai. The UN is estimating, as I mentioned a little earlier, 1.7 million people in the path of this devastating cyclone. Let's get the latest now from CGTN's Angelo Coppola. He's in Maputo for us tonight. So, Angelo, ground zero really for Cyclone Idai was further north from where you are in Beira. But what are you hearing, what are you seeing about the damage inflicted so far from the authorities in Maputo?
Well, look, what we do know at the moment is that as of Saturday and Sunday, the government of Luxembourg and the World Food Programme managed to establish some ITC systems at the Beira airport that was used to coordinate rescue attempts and also to drive the aid process. We also do understand now that the airport at Beira is open, so those aid teams can actually fly directly in and avoid the roads in the area that have obviously been devastated by the floods and by that collapsed dam wall that happened on Sunday. So that's starting to take some shape. We understand that there are some voice services available for the local providers, which is also important because now people can start communicating with each other, start finding out where their loved ones are, for example, and that's important because we now need to track down people who may have gone missing and who obviously couldn't make contact with their loved ones in the area or in other parts of Maputo or Mozambique or other parts of Africa. So comms are up and running, airports open, aid teams are starting to move in, and we probably start seeing some actions now, provided that we don't have more rain in the foreseeable future. Rahman?
Meteorologists have described this as one of the worst storms we've seen in the Indian Ocean, especially the southern part of it, with sustained winds of over 190 kilometers an hour, dumping as much as 400 millimeters of rainfall in some parts of southern Africa. Were the countries that were hit so far, were they prepared in any way for this?
Ryan, you know how this goes. No one's prepared for those kinds of winds, that amount of rain in such a short space of time. And the areas that were hit around the Beira area and also further, remember there were floods already. There were heavy rains that had hit this area already. So the area was already under pressure. So when that wind came through, bringing that 400 millimeters of rain, it just made the situation even worse. The people live in homes that are threadbare at best. The roads, the infrastructure generally is of a really low quality. People are really poor in this environment, but the government hasn't got to that area yet to establish proper roads. The main road, the EN1 and the EN2, are probably the only well-tarred roads in the area, and obviously the bridges that cross over those seasonal flooded rivers are obviously washed away as well. So no one is prepared for this kind of thing, even in a more developed country. If Beira to be hit by, if Maputo were to be hit by this kind of wind, we'd see similar kind of devastation. So nobody can be prepared for this. It's the worst case scenario, Rahman.
Indeed. So the UN has appealed for at least $40 million, that's the last number that I did see, in order to fund and deliver emergency relief to the affected. How far along are they in hitting that goal in cash and kind?
Well, look, it's still early days in terms of raising that kind of money. But, I mean, people kind of, I'm going to make a comment here generally. African countries, when they go through these kinds of disasters, money comes flooding in, aid comes flooding in. It's welcomed, it's brought in, it's managed by the more reputable aid agencies. They do a really good job. But when that's all said and done, they move off and the infrastructure stays disused or broken. The people have to rebuild their lives again. So that $14 million will go some way to relieving some of the stress being felt in the immediate future, but we need long-term, sustainable kind of commitment here to get the infrastructure in place that will protect people and provide shelter in these kinds of once-off storms. Rahman?
Indeed, and of course the reconstruction bill alone is just going to be absolutely massive. Angelo Coppola in Maputo, thank you very much for the update. Of course, we have teams out on the ground in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique and in Malawi. We'll keep you updated on the developments in that part of the continent. Now, let's turn to a different story. The investigation into the final minutes of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 turned on Tuesday to the secrets in the cockpit voice recorder. The crew's last dialogue in the plane and with the tower could reveal what essentially led to the March 10 crash that has worrying parallels with another disaster involving the same model plane off Indonesia last October. Now, the black box data was downloaded in France, but so far only the Ethiopian officials who are leading the probe have heard the last minutes of dialogue between the airline's captain and the first officer. According to experts, an automated system in Boeing's flagship 737 MAX fleet may have played a role in both of these incidents. A preliminary report on what exactly happened on the flight is expected to be issued within the next 30 days. All right then, so let's start our corporate headlines in Zimbabwe. Authorities there are planning to raise over $300 million from the sale of stakes in 5 state-owned telecommunications companies as part of its economic reforms. Now, companies targeted include the mobile phone operators Net1 and Telecel Zimbabwe, the country's sole fixed-line telephony firm Tel1, postal services firm Zimpost, and the state-owned savings bank POSB. Elsewhere, South Africa's Steinhoff has identified 8 people, including the former CEO Marcus Jooste, as being allegedly behind the questionable transactions that brought this global retailer to near collapse. The revelations come days after a forensic probe by PwC uncovered $7.4 billion of irregular transactions with 8 firms between 2009 and 2017. Still in South Africa, the state-owned utility Eskom continues to roll out planned power cuts across the country as it plans to implement Stage 5 and Stage 6 load shedding. These stages will cut about 5,000 and 6,000 megawatts of generation capacity from the grid. Eskom supplies more than 90% of South Africa's electricity. And the Warner Brothers chairman and CEO Kevin Sujihara has stepped down from the studios nearly 2 weeks after getting caught up in a sexual misconduct scandal. His exit comes a few weeks after the Hollywood Reporter revealed text messages alleging that Sujihara had a sexual relationship with a British actress. That's a run through your company headlines. We're 15 minutes past the hour. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. A Kenyan court has nullified a double taxation agreement between the country and Mauritius. What happens next? And Nigeria's central bank is restricting the import of textiles in order to support the local industry. Bad economics, or will it work? We'll have some answers shortly.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairo. Hello, Nairo.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just a Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference. Welcome back to the program. Now, the double taxation agreement between Kenya and Mauritius was nullified by Kenya's High Court on the 15th of March. In his judgment, Judge Edward Mureithi pointed out that the DTA was not laid before Parliament for ratification. Not complying with the Kenyan Statutory Instruments Act, he said, the agreement is therefore null and void. Now, the case challenging the DTA had been launched by the East African unit of the Tax Justice Network, which argued in part that the deal would cause tax revenue losses for the Kenyan state. Now, let's flip back a bit here. When the agreement was originally gazetted, this was back in 2014, PricewaterhouseCoopers Kenya outlet argued that the reduced withholding tax rates on dividends, among other issues, makes it advantageous to hold Kenyan investments using a Mauritius holding company. And that was one of several other benefits that it did outline in a note to clients. Mauritius, of course, does have an outsized presence as a hub for capital flows into Africa and other parts of the world as well. It's a preferred business destination for quite a few enterprises. It's not only ranked first in the ease of doing business reports on the World Bank, it also has a relatively lower income tax rate on both personal and corporate income compared to other economies on the continent. Top tax rates of 15% on both of those categories. So then, what does this mean for companies that have subsidiaries in both countries, as well as Kenya's tax revenue base as well? Let's find out. Jared Maranga is the policy lead on tax and investments at that advocacy groups, TJN. He's live in studio with me tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ron.
So in a nutshell, for those of us who are not tax experts, explain to us why this deal was not productive for the Kenyan government.
So basically, regarding the double tax agreement between Kenya and Mauritius, what was looked at basically was the fact that Tax Justice Network Africa carried out a series of research prior to the signing of the DTA, which led to inform that there are so many flaws that are contained in the DTAs that have been signed, majorly in sub-Saharan Africa. And since then, after that, then there was a signing of the DTAs between Mauritius and Kenya, so which followed after the researches that have been done. So this informed from the findings that there is a need for us to relook at the kind of processes that were put in place in terms of putting the DTAs into signing the DTAs into action or into force.
But looking at your petition to the court, one of the main arguments that you made at the time was, when you being TJN, one of the arguments you made was that this was counterproductive for the Kenyan tax base because it would reduce the amount of income that the Kenyan government could legally collect from government. But then I look at the judgment, and the judgment was decided purely on a legal technicality matter, a matter of process. This step did not happen. It was not laid before Parliament. Therefore, it's null and void. Why did the court not touch the economic side of the case?
Okay, the court did not look at the technical part of it, basically because part of our asks were purely on constitutional arrangement and the rule of law, how the process has been done. But again, to substantiate the kind of argument that we put in place, we had to look at the technical aspects that contained in that DTA. And among them, you realize that they are reduced tax rates. When you look at them and compare comparatively with the tax rates that Kenya has, then you realize there could be some level of compromise that will come in, which will create avenues for tax planning, especially through the issues of tax treaty shopping and also round-tripping aspects, which essentially will affect the tax base of Kenya, considering if we're going to have probably the head offices or the holding companies moving out of Kenya to Mauritius, what that means is that maybe they're going to pay out dividends from Kenya, then it means that the dividends will not be productive in the country, and essentially that means that we have capped the tax base that is going to be subjected for productivity in our country. Are there instances you can cite where a company, a multinational or a large Kenyan firm has been taken to court and charged with essentially tax planning purposes, or rather with tax planning? Because even if you look at the NSE listed firms, for instance, there are quite a few that do have outlets or subsidiaries that are based in Mauritius, and it's a favorite haven for private equity firms as well. At the moment, it's very hard to come out clearly with a specific example of a company that has been really charged of tax planning. But again, looking at the way the DTA has been structured, it provides that avenue of tax planning. And that's why we had to go and try to see what mechanisms can the government put in place to cap such kind of issues arising in the near future.
Right. So one of the things that struck me about the way the judgment had been set up, the judge said that basically, yes, we've struck this down, but you cannot therefore, it doesn't affect arrangements that were in place for the duration of the DTA. But and of course there might be an appeal from the government. We're not sure if that's coming up just yet, but it's reasonable to expect one. How does this then change the tax base?
That nullification. But at the moment, it's like we are in a status quo.
But related to that, is there, given the fact that this DTA never went into effect, the Mauritian side never ratified it, although the Kenyan side did, what's the advantage then for operating from Mauritius? Because it doesn't seem like there's a definitive tax advantage.
As you indicated clearly in your introductory remarks, is that the corporate tax rates in Mauritius comparative to the corporate tax rates in Kenya, you know that there is a really huge difference. And initially, Mauritius has been operating like a two-tier system, let me say, call them legal firms, legal formations of corporations. We had what we call GPC1 and GPC2. You realize if you're operating a GPC2, initially it was exempt from taxation. And if you're operating a GPC1, then there is that advantage of having 15% corporation tax rate. Yeah. So if you compare that, you have that advantage. If you were to do a net effect, then effectively, if you are a Kenyan operation moving out to Mauritius, you're going to have like a 15% saving in terms of taxation or tax liabilities. So I think that can drive the kind of arrangement or planning that a multinational or a corporation can do so that it can minimize the tax costs.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Jared Maranga from TGN. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right then, so away from matters to do with taxation, let's focus on infrastructure for a moment. Kenya is on course to complete the second phase, phase 2A, as it's commonly known, of the standard gauge rail line in June as initially planned. But there have been quite a few hurdles, like the delayed compensation of landowners that risk holding back this project. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Mashala with the latest.
Kenya's standard gauge railway here in its second phase of construction. It is scheduled for completion in June 2019, but there have been hurdles, especially compensation of landowners. Some are yet to settle on payment with the National Land Commission. Still, 85% of the work has been done, and the Kenya Railways Corporation, as well as the China Communications Construction Company, maintain confidence that they could meet the June deadline.
Out of the 1,708 pubs, we have done almost 50%, and we have only 380 who are actually on the ground. But as you know, compensation is not our mandate.
The 120-kilometer line is one of 3 segments that make up the second phase of construction of the SGR construction that terminates at Malaba. Now, phase 2A, which goes through Naivasha, will also go through Nairobi, Kajiado, Kiambu, Nakuru, and Narok. The new phase will also have 5 new stations, namely Ongata Rongai, Ngong, Nachu, Maimahiu, and Suswa.
And there are notable milestones like this tunnel. It's the longest railway tunnel in Kenya, measuring 4.5 kilometers at Mbulmbul in Kajiado County. It is also the second longest railway tunnel in Africa. As far as revenue, the operator says that it is on course to break even.
Because with reliable transportation, with reliable mode of movement, both for cargo and human beings, then there is hastening of economic activity, there is contribution towards the economic, the GDP of this country. So we expect that people will disperse and they move away from the highly densely populated areas like Nairobi and establish themselves within Naivasha along the railway line and develop economic activities there.
Apart from being one of the major tourism hubs in Kenya, Naivasha is also the country's center for geothermal production. The $1.5 billion project will also have designated industrial zones. To attract investors to set up industries at designated zones near Naivasha's Olkaria area, the Kenyan government will offer subsidized power tariffs and ensure uninterrupted supply. Overall, on completion, the project is expected to contribute significantly to the country's economic growth. Alexandria Mashala for CGTN, Ngong, Kenya.
It's time for another break. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. The US aims to challenge OPEC in shale production. And we'll look at why the business of hair is booming, but for men in China. All that and more is coming up shortly.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's recap the stories making your headlines at this hour. The United Nations is describing Cyclone Idai as possibly the worst weather-related disaster to ever hit Southern Africa. The cyclone caused widespread damage across these 3 different countries. The UN is estimating that 1.7 million people were directly in the path of this cyclone in Mozambique alone. The country's president, Filipe Nyusi, estimates more than 1,000 people died in this storm. Cyclone Idai also swept through eastern Zimbabwe and southern Malawi, causing quite a bit of damage. African Union forces from the Kenyan contingent have moved out of several military bases along the border with Somalia. Al-Shabaab militants have since recaptured the bases, leading to mass displacement of locals who are fleeing to nearby El Wak. It's approximately 40 kilometers from the 2 countries' border. Sudan and South Sudan have agreed to open all the crossing points agreed upon between them within a month. The withdrawal of troops will be followed by the formation of a buffer zone. A follow-up meeting is expected to be held on the 17th of April in Juba. Joint team sponsored by the UN Interim Security Force for Abyei will also be sent to verify the situation on the ground. And finally, the Ethiopian government, together with the International Organization for Migration, have helped to return more than 2,000 Ethiopians who are illegally residing in Saudi Arabia. According to the Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the phase-by-phase repatriation of citizens will continue until the number of citizens in different Middle Eastern countries has been lowered, in their words, close to 0. That's a run through your headlines. Let's head over to Nigeria now. The central bank over there has directed commercial banks and Forex Bureau to stop importers of textiles and textile materials from being able to buy foreign exchange, at least not through the formal market. Now, the move is aimed at restricting textile imports in order to support a local industry that's been struggling for years. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more.
Nothing clearly paints a true picture of the state of the Nigerian textile industry than this image. At its peak, this foremost textile factory in Nigeria's northwest Kaduna state employed thousands and churned out some of Nigeria's finest textile materials. But since 2012, when it stopped operation, the facility has continued to rot away. Smaller textile industries like this one in Lagos are managing to keep their machines running. Business has been tough. The company's warehouse is packed full with finished products. It's struggling to find enough market for them. It's local companies like this that the Central Bank of Nigeria is hoping its new policy banning the sale of forex to importers of textiles and clothing materials would help to keep their business around. But the man who runs the factory says while the policy is a very positive one, much still needs to be done to help the local textile industry.
They should look deep. Why are the cost of production in Nigeria so high? One of it, you have multiple taxes, you have the cost of gas.
Beyond the high cost of production local textile manufacturers are contending with, there's also the bigger problem of smuggled cheaper textile and clothing materials flooding the Nigerian market.
But the federal government need to make a law that we enforce buy made Nigerian goods. If it takes us to become the enemy of other neighboring countries, we should wake up, we should do what is right. After all, when the Chinese close their border, they know what they are doing.
If we are going to marry what the central bank governor has said and what the Executive Order 003 has provided, and the whole campaign of Made in Nigerian products. You would like to focus on the military, for instance, the police, the immigration, those that wear uniform. If all of those essentially patronize Made in Nigerian products for their uniforms and even their shoes, you will see that that alone will boost the production in that sector.
Apart from the central bank's initiative, the government has in the past extended financial lifeline to some textile firms in the country in a bid to rejuvenate the sector. But as things stand, the Nigerian textile industry is still way off from recovery. It certainly would take more than what is being thrown at it to get that giant of an industry come to life again. Dejibadmo, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Boeing's grounded 737 MAX aircraft, you remember them, they do continue to roll off the production line in the U.S. plane makers' 737 factory near Seattle in Washington. Completed 737 MAX 8 aircraft, even though they've been grounded by the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration following the crashes of flights 8302 and Lion Air-610, are still permitted to fly between Boeing facilities for testing and other scenarios. Boeing confirmed suspension of deliveries on this particular aircraft on the 14th of March, but it does continue to produce its single-aisle jets at full speed while dealing with worldwide 737 MAX fleets grounding in the wake of the crash of ET302. Boeing says it plans to maintain its production rate to 52 planes a month, but it will pause deliveries while keeping production rates unchanged at its factory in Renton in Washington. The International Energy Agency has released its annual 5-year forecast for the energy industry, and it could deliver some interesting news, or bad news if you will, for OPEC. The IEA is forecasting a boom in US shale output. As Japo Greaves reports from Dubai, that does pose a rather large problem for the oil cartel.
The second wave of US shale oil is coming. That's the message from the International Energy Agency's latest 5-year forecast. It thinks America will account for 70% of global capacity growth over that period. If true, that level would surpass Russian exports and bring it close to Saudi Arabia's crown as top exporter, raising the question of OPEC's market share and whether in the future it can afford to cut supply to influence price.
At this moment in time, there is certainly a need for both shale and everybody else's oil barrels. Whether there will be a need in 5 years' time, the fight gets tighter, if peak demand happens, that's a big question. I suspect it will, and I suspect OPEC will not be able to hold on to the maximized price over market share strategy as they have done for the last 50 years.
It comes at a time when OPEC, alongside the likes of Russia, have been pursuing production cuts to try and boost oil prices. But as the US eyes a more influential future on export markets, questions are being asked of OPEC's room for growth. One of the main forecasts from the IEA is that many OPEC producers will struggle to significantly increase capacity over the next 5 years, with the report suggesting just Iraq and the UAE will be able to substantially increase output. Part of the issue analysts say might be courting investment.
Sure, OPEC faces a lot of challenges in trying to maintain its oil production. A lot of countries are faced with declining mature fields. They have to invest a lot of money to get those fields to replace those barrels that they're losing to natural decline. And one of the messages that OPEC has for the market is that they need to see more sustained investment in the industry overall. We're seeing a lot of investment in the U.S. in this shale oil, the short cycle shale oil that brings about returns more quickly than the typical long cycle projects that take a lot of investment and sometimes take up to a decade, even longer sometimes, to pay back what you've originally invested.
US sanctions on OPEC members Iran and Venezuela could further dent future capacity. For now, the message from OPEC on US shale is that there's enough space for everyone. But that could change further down the pipeline if it leaks market influence to what was once its biggest consumer. Jacob Greaves, CGTN in Dubai.
The British government's plans for Brexit have been thrown into more confusion by a ruling from the House Speaker John Bercow. He says that the Prime Minister will be prevented constitutionally from putting her EU withdrawal plan before the House of Commons for a third time if it's the exact same deal. Here's Richard Bestick reporting from London.
The Prime Minister's Brexit deal had already been twice overwhelmingly rejected by Parliament. Britain's beleaguered Premier struggling to drum up the numbers needed to get a third attempt over the line. Locked in intensive talks with those lined up against her, the last thing Theresa May needed was a surprise intervention by Speaker John Bercow. Citing precedents dating back to 1604, he told Parliament the government couldn't just bring the same old deal back time and again in one session unless it substantially changed.
This ruling should not be regarded as my last word on the subject. It is simply meant to indicate the test which the government must meet in order for me to rule that a third meaningful vote can legitimately be held in this parliamentary session. Order.
All this on the eve of May's trip to Brussels to ask a summit of European Union leaders for an extension to Brexit beyond the March 29th deadline. It's more than just embarrassing for the Prime Minister. It leaves her in a position where the EU may insist Brexit is put on hold for anything up to 2 years, while the UK sorts itself out, effectively kicking the entire Brexit project deep into the long grass. As for John Bercow, well, the backlash has begun, with accusations the Speaker's ruling is breaking the British Constitution. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
Hair loss has become quite a buzzword among young, balding Chinese men as the problem becomes increasingly visible. That increasing anxiety over their shiny domes has also created a lucrative opportunity for related business, like hair transplant surgery. CGTN's Yang Jihao has more.
Painting on the head? Actually, this is not artistic creation. It's a preparatory step for hair transplant surgery. Zhang Tao, a mechanician from southwestern Chinese city of Chengdu, pins his hope on this trendy way to end his long-time struggle once for all.
I've had this problem for about 9 years and tried many products, including many imported ones, but all in vain. I finally decided to try the transplant option, as I think the technology is more advanced now.
Tens of millions of others in the country share the young man's frustration. The China Association of Health Promotion and Education has estimated about 250 million Chinese are plagued by hair loss. A latest case, an online recruitment notice for 30 volunteers to test a hair growth product in Chengdu, soon went viral, attracting about 20,000 applicants within 2 days, and most of them were in their 20s and 30s. Medical experts say multiple factors are to blame.
An important aspect is that people's lifestyles have changed a lot. Despite improvements in living standards, people's workloads have also intensified. Meanwhile, changing recreational habits like excessive smartphone use have affected many people's sleep.
Dr. Li adds that other causes like pollution and people's dietary habits cannot be ignored either. The increasing anxiety caused by hair loss has created a lucrative market. Besides all kinds of hair care products, China has seen a boom of hair transplant institutions in recent years. And the emerging industry has attracted the attention of investors. Several leading brands, including Yonghe Hair Transplant, have acquired large investments. Last year, Yonghe carried out 38,000 surgeries nationwide, about 20 times the number 5 years ago. Beyond the increasing demand, its president Zhang Yu also says the sector is seeing some new trends.
Our clients are becoming younger on the whole. Our busiest time is usually during the summer and winter holidays. Meanwhile, more and more people now come in for artistic hair transplants. Treatment is not their only need, so the number of female clients is growing fast.
Zhang Yu is expecting some serious competition. and more players are rolling in, which urgently calls for proper regulation of this fast-growing market. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Chengdu.
All right, then let's make a quick run through commodity prices before we jump into the next segment. So oil prices still holding over at around the $67 level. Not much change from what we did see yesterday. But the real play in the last 6 months or so, palladium. It does continue its very strong ascent so far in the year. It actually crossed a new record today, $1,600. First time it's ever been north of that territory. To put it into context, remember, this is a metal whose spot cost was around $800 in August. In part, the surge is due to limited supplies, and that's needed by car makers if they're going to hit increasingly tighter and tighter emissions targets. Here's what's coming up next. We'll explore furniture in Nigeria with a touch of Yoruba.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the program. You're watching Global Business Africa. Now, South Africa is widening its incubation program for small and medium-sized enterprises. At this point, there are over 280 different hubs, and they all help budding entrepreneurs with business space, skills development, and financial management too. The country's president recently expressed the importance of these hubs in building entrepreneurs and building their businesses as well. Julie Shire visited the Riversands Incubation Hub in Midrand to see how it works for grassroots tonight.
Small businesses could be the key to tackling South Africa's almost 30% unemployment rate. But most micro enterprises fail in the first 12 months. The Riversands Incubation Hub is one of over 280 centres around the country set up to reverse this trend.
There are some businesses where the starting point is just understanding the money flows through your business. In another case, the business might be looking to scale. Many of them women entrepreneurs in those low barrier to entry businesses who are making a massive difference within their own immediate circles.
The hub is situated just a few kilometres from Diepsloot Township. Like most informal settlements, it has a vibrant entrepreneurial culture, but businesses still struggle to survive.
It was a very difficult road for me because I lost my oven under that same roof where I was operating. My house caught fire and everything got burnt. They've given me space to work, to operate my business. They've given me the support in terms of how to be a professional business person.
I'm standing in the middle of the Riversands Incubation Hub. Around me there are dozens of small businesses who use this platform to grow their startups and develop a firm footing in the market.
Incubation have helped me to grow the business. I've tripled my turnover. I've been almost 3 years now in the Incubation Hub. We distribute nationwide, right? From here in Johannesburg, we do Pretoria. From here, we're sending out to Durban, Polokwane, Klerksdorp, and also Swakopmund and Namibia as well.
The Incubation Hub actually helped us through that process, get our management accounts right, helped us to get an accountant, and make sure that our books are in order. And as well as being in the space, we have better cooking facilities, it's much more open, and we're able also to just get more staff because we've grown since we've been here.
South Africa's economic growth hasn't lifted above 2% over the last few years. Despite tough trading conditions, the 170 businesses that operate from this hub have created over 2,700 jobs in the last 3 years. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
On to Nigeria now to look at a furniture maker. Tosin Oshinowo is incorporating traditional Asa-Oke fabric into contemporary designs. Her lifestyle brand is celebrating West African culture and it's growing quite rapidly in popularity. CGTN's Laura Olubengo reports.
Asa-Oke cloth is traditionally hand-loomed by the Yoruba community in West Africa. Up-and-coming Nigerian designer Tosin Oshinowo is now using this cultural fabric to make chairs. Her contemporary lifestyle brand, Ile Ila, translates as House of Lines.
The vision behind Ile Ila really was about celebration of self, celebration of culture, celebration of being Yoruba, celebration of being Nigerian, celebration of being African. I'm really trying to find a space in the market where creating strong, contemporary, authentic African bespoke furniture, we hadn't seen anything that kind of existed in that realm, and we wanted to fill that gap.
Trained as an architect, Oshinowo designs digitally, which she says improves precision and quality. A team of carpenters and tailors then bring her creations to life, building frames and fitting upholstery. The 39-year-old says the handmade chairs are built with locally sourced wood and fabrics.
I like the traditional feeling about it. While I was growing up, I think my dad has a chair like this, and it's called one Yoruba name, Agbantara or something. So, and I like the fact that it comes in the traditional material that is Ashoke, which I kind of like.
It's not an imitation chair of another company or another designer. And being able to take the importance of design, aesthetic, and marry it with authentic African in terms of the materials that we use, I think is really what makes the brand strong.
Ile Ila furniture is priced between $1,000 and $2,000. So far, Oshinowo has sold about 200 pieces since she set up shop in 2017. A small business owner is now looking to scale up production. Laura Olubengo, CGTN.
And finally, Morocco is known for its fertile lands and abundance of water supply and proximity to Europe, which at this point is its main market for its fruits. This year, the North African nation has celebrated its 9th edition of its annual Strawberry Festival with a new initiative to boost production. Here's CGTN's Noel Makugu with the story.
This festival is organized annually by the Nalicia Foundation. It is designed to familiarize Moroccan strawberry growers with new methods of producing and conserving the fruit. Here, participants from across the globe line up to showcase their harvest.
We choose this slogan, especially this year, around the theme of scientific research, especially biological treatment against fungal diseases in strawberries, with the use of biological substance for the health of the consumer as well as the soils.
Over 4,300 hectares have been devoted to strawberry farming in Morocco, mostly in northwestern area of the country. The strawberry industry boasts around 18,000 workers, predominantly women from the rural areas.
The women in the fields are workers who receive a wage for their labor. We want them to be entrepreneurs and landowners instead of being paid workers. We want them to contribute to the development of their country alongside their male brothers.
The Moroccan strawberry industry has in recent years continued to observe an increase in production. The Ministry of Agriculture says this year's harvest is expected to reach a record high of about 200,000 tons compared to the previous year's 180,000 tons. Most of the country's production is destined for export to the European Union.
Exports in this sector witnessed a great increase for fresh fruit as well as frozen ones. As you're all aware, manufacturing in this field gives an added value to the product. This was all achieved thanks to the incentive given by the Green Morocco Plan. By activating it, exports of strawberries are set to triple by 2020.
Morocco has about 300 small, medium and large strawberry growers in the western region. Like many at this event, Moroccan strawberry farmers remain optimistic as they take advantage of the country's favorable climate and soil conditions to achieve better results. Noel Makugu, CGTN.
Quick run through the currencies as we wrap up the program. Ghana's cedi was relatively low, 5.42 to the dollar today. Then it started to gain throughout the day, closing at about 5.3725, up about 8/10 rather of a percent over the course of the day. The rand had a bit of a strong showing from midday, but those gains didn't last long. 14.452 was the number at 15:39 GMT. One for your Canada's next week on the 27th of March. Kenya's central bank will be holding its next MPC meeting then. The usual post-MPC briefing, of course, occurs 24 hours thereafter. Those are your currencies, and that's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There's several ways of getting your thoughts back to us. All of them are on your screens right now. I'm Rahmah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.